I will say though, thank you. I will say though, just one thing, just sort of a tie back to the military. I was before the ROTC gig, I was a airborne infantryman, and that that discipline, if you will, relies on small teams, small disciplined teams executing in a very nebulous situation with a superior framework of what's called commander's intent. So you execute an operation with commander's intent and a task and purpose for your unit. And every soldier, every soldier through the chain of command down to the lowest private rifleman is trained to know their task and purpose. And the overall plan might not survive first contact with the enemy, but everyone knows like what the end state is and what that commander's intent is. So you jump out of, a fleet of aircraft in the middle of the night, 1,000 feet over a drop zone, and assemble in the dark and grab your weapon and find your battle buddy and move to the assembly area. You don't know what's going to happen, but you do know like what your task and purpose is, seize the objective. And that sort of like environment relies on small disciplined teams that know each other really well, work together really well, and have a clear task and purpose, and then adapt. Like it's all about adaptability. So we're going to talk today about Agile or agility as a means of adaptability, and how that adaptability and mindset can navigate a complex situation. I'd like you all to get a taste of the grounding philosophy and principles of agility, so that we might be able to apply it to our world in our work situation. So that's kind of my purpose for today for you all. So we'll go over, we just hit a little bit on that. I want to kind of hear what you all came for. So we're going to do an exercise for that. The first part of this, sort of, I said, upfront context setting, we're going to talk about moving from a predict and plan environment to a sense and respond environment. And that's a key concept, right? We can predict and plan, but in the military example I just shared you, no plan survives first contact. So we have to be able to sense and respond. And in the complex world we're working in, and what I do every day at my company with my team, we don't know what customers want. So I work in a big financial institution, and we're the bread and butter is high net worth, much older clients, and we're trying to seize an opportunity for younger investors. That is a very complex environment, and we're kind of wading into it. We're doing this in a very agile way because the situation's not known. Like we have to kind of observe the market and understand what people want and release products on a short time horizon to get feedback. And that's the essence of Agile. So we're going to talk about that, moving from predict and plan, future is stable and known, to sense and respond and an adaptive approach. Now we're going to talk about 4 key points of agility. I already hit on one, which is a real agile team collaboration. We'll hit on the other 3 as well. Probably going to skip the simulation for this group. I was thinking about a way to do something in Trello, but we'll probably save that. I do want to hit on Trello though later on. So the simulation, the application piece will kind of adjust as we go. And then we'll do a closing, and then we'll do a retrospective, which is an event to sort of get feedback on this session, and explore takeaways. So that was my agenda, but what is yours? So if everyone could, on their Zoom panel, you should see an annotate button. Jennifer, what'd you say? It's under more?
So it's up at the top of your screen under view options.
View options, thank you. Should see an annotate, like you get a drop-down menu and it says annotate. Click on that and you get this like new modal, this little like bar that comes out. On that bar, you can draw, you can text, you can spotlight eraser. Hit the little text box and then click on this white screen and you should be able to just start typing.
I'm sorry, is it in the chat window or is it in view?
No, when you're looking at, yeah, Praful, good question. So when you're looking at the Zoom screen, you're looking at Our Highest Hopes, like my slide. At the top, you should see view options.
I don't see that.
Should be in the, I think it's in the upper right.
Are you guys finding it?
I did not.
We can take a few minutes here. I'm curious.
Oh, okay. I see that. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
You can erase anything you wrote. You can change the text color, the little format button. It's blue. You can click that and pick a different color if you want. I just spread these out with the select tool a little bit. All right, who has it figured out? Like, show of hands. I got it. I already wrote something. Okay, cool. So we got most. If you're still working, do you want a few more minutes? I'm happy to pass. Happy to let you pass. Andrea, what do you think? You getting there? Are you good now?
I wrote something.
Cool.
Am I good now? No. I wrote something.
Write something. Okay, good. Cool. All right, cool. Yeah, I think everyone got the hang of this. Anyone stuck? It's okay if you are. All right. This was absolutely the simplest way I could think of to get everybody interacting. Right, if you're in person, I'd be passing out markers and stickies and make you all write some thoughts down, but this is a really easy way to just get some interaction. So I appreciate everyone giving that a shot. We'll do that a couple more times. All right, so what's up here? Applying Agile concepts to teaching a diverse group of students, new to Agile, manage my time, learn more about Agile. Not sure, but I want to learn more about it. Need to learn more. Excited. Heard of Scrum. Extend my knowledge. Awesome. And so there's me just quickly reading. Does anyone want to share their thoughts with the group? What is your highest hope for this session?
I can at least say something. I mean, I feel like I try to be efficient in what I do and adapt and do stuff, but how to kind of translate that out to a group or team or
Yeah.
committee, I'm not sure. I think I'm trying to do stuff like that, but maybe I'm not succeeding.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing, Jennifer. And as we kind of go through and please be vocal about and sort of talk through how you might be able to apply this. We can talk it through. Roseanne with the raised hand. Awesome. Please.
I want to find out with how we do things, if it's really coined as agile, because we're always talking about plan A, plan B, and being flexible and the end of the world not happening and that type of thing. If we have to change a plan midstream, and try to convey that to our faculty and then also our student groups when they are out there in the public health and health sector.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah, the ability to gracefully adjust and adapt, like as a habit, that's a really good call out. Raful.
Yes. So going back on that previous one, my thought process when I heard previously with Dr. Bunn, you come from a completely different perspective, in the industry. So there are a lot of things, I hope to learn from the business management perspective as how those kind of concepts can be applicable to, better management of our own programming, and to be honest, I'm clueless, in this concept. So, anything new to learn will obviously help me in that process. Thanks.
Thanks for your vulnerability and willingness to learn. Appreciate that. Yeah. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I'm going to chime in real fast and just say academia is the opposite of anything agile. It is a very slow moving ship. It is not very maneuverable. It is a longboard if it were a surfboard. It's not a shortboard at all. And so I think we do a very good job of predicting and planning. And especially those of us with a strong research background, like everything is predict and plan. But sense and respond is certainly an area of weakness for me. And some of that simply because, by golly, I have a plan and I will carry that plan out. And so the maneuvering piece, the sidestep or pivot or what have you, whatever you want to call it, I stink at that. So I could definitely use some assistance there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that. And so, my highest hope for you all is that you take some little bit, whether it's something about the way we're working and conversing in the tooling, or just a mindset shift about it's okay to change, it's okay to adapt. This group of incredibly brilliant, talented people is not going to change the way Sam Houston State University works overnight. But as with Agile, an iterative and incremental change, right? You all can take some of this and apply it and sort of go back and, start a bit of an incremental shift in mindset. So that's my hope for you all, is take some bit of this away. Cool. All right, I need to erase all these. These are awesome. What I want to do is save. Okay, so I saved that cap as an image, and I will I'll add it to the PDF that I send to you all afterwards. I should have a way to clear all. Clear my drawings, clear readers' drawings. I'm a little new to annotate. all drawings. There we go. Okay. All right, so we're going to get into this first part here, which is moving from predict and plan to sense and respond. Just one second. Many monitors, many things to adjust. All right. So ways of working and how management the concept of management is only about a century old, right? And the way that we organize labor in an industrial era is sort of making a shift. And we're going to talk about that paradigm shift in the next few slides. But we're sort of on the cusp a little bit of a revolution. And it started in the software space. If you all have heard of Agile or Scrum, you likely associate it with technology. It was championed from some software thought leaders, software engineers in the 90s in response to heavyweight burdensome, like bureaucratic software development methods. It was called the software development lifecycle. And it was this concept of like, we identify requirements up front and then we write it all down in this massive document. And then we hand it over to some analysis group to like refine that. And then we hand it over to an engineer to design it all. And then design goes to, development, and then development onto test. And these were all seen as discrete linear steps. And you mapped it all out and you said 12-month project. Well, the thing is, the environment changes too quickly and we don't know what customers want at the outset. So from a product development standpoint, that second point is the most important. But the environment changing quickly is a very stark reality. The rate of change, the world will never change again as slowly as it does right now. Every day, every week, every month, the rate of change in the world gets faster and faster, right? We're living in an era of complex change. And in order to deal with that reality, we've got to adapt a different type of mindset. And so the software folks that were and invented Agile and kind of brought this to the forefront, we're trying to solve a problem of product development. But what we found in the Agile industry is it actually springs forth a different way of working and this concept of business agility where the whole organization needs to get on board. Technology as a department can be fast and agile and nimble, but if we're still weighed down by HR and finance and other functions, we're still working in silos. You have to have the whole organization functioning together. And then back to the management piece, there was we've learned throughout the 20th century different ways of trying to manage folks, and there's different epochs and eras that we've gone through. We're in a very interesting time right now, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So think about the world today. Think about everything going on. These are just a few of the social movements from the past decade, just social movements. We've got the global pandemic right now. There was a lot of stock market volatility earlier in the year. We're still dealing with massive complexity on a global scale. The term for this, also taken from the military, is VUCA, We're living in a VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Volatile in the sense that there's a high rate of change. Just like I said, the rate of change now is the slowest it will ever be. It just gets faster and faster. More connected, population grows every year, global phenomenon increase. Outcomes are unpredictable. That's the U, uncertainty. So we can't know what's going to happen. We can't predict in a linear fashion, in a lot of cases, what's going to happen. Complex in the sense that there's a lot of system variables. So there's a lot, when we think about our environment and our work world, there's a lot of variables from a human perspective, from a technical perspective. And then finally, ambiguous in that it's hard to make meaning sometimes unless it's retrospective. So up front, there's a lot of ambiguity, and we have to navigate this VUCA world. So agility, and this is from the work of Ralph Stacey, and then a couple of those software luminaries that I mentioned from the 90s took this work and adapted it, Ken Schwaber and Mike Beadle. If we look at this, if we look at the two axes here, technology or the how something works, moving from the origin of close to certainty to far from certainty. And the vertical axis, requirements, what? So what do we think we want to do? And then how can we do it? If you're close to certainty and agreement, it's a simple operation. We can use predictive planning. We can sense, categorize, and respond. It's business as usual, right? We know how this works. We've got a playbook. We do it every day. It's a simple task. As we move out to something that's a little bit further on what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, well, then we build a project. We make a plan. We design what the requirements are, and we gather resources and people, and we get to work. And we hope that they're delivering something that's valuable in the end. So we sense and analyze and respond. If you have no idea what you're doing, like you're on fire, right? And I mean that in a sort of a joking way, right? Like everything's chaos, it's chaotic. Certainly we could be talking about a life and death situation, but I mean more just, a very, very chaotic, unstable thing. You don't have any choice but to act and sort of sense and respond afterwards. But this middle space, this space where the world is complex and we're not entirely sure what we need, and we're not entirely sure how to do it. This is where Agile transformation can come in and can really help, because it teaches you this sense and respond paradigm. This probe is in try something, sense, inspect, see how it works, and then respond, adapt. Try, inspect, and adapt. We set up tiny experiments, and it's this mindset of empiricism. We set up little experiments to get data on our environment and see how it's working. Now, Agile has its roots in Lean. When we sent Deming and others over to, the US government sent Deming and others over to Japan to help rebuild after World War II, and observing the Toyota company's manufacturing process, and then tried to bring it over to Motorola and GM, and it didn't work because we didn't understand the roots behind it. But it was this idea of statistical process control, using empiricism and using data of understanding how a system works to find variances and try to bring those variances back to the mean. So when an Agile team does a retrospective, every 2 weeks on how their work went in the sprint, they're looking for variances. They're looking for, hey, why did this one day we get so distracted? Or why did this conflict between person A and person B take so much time? Why couldn't we figure it out? Or, hey, we tried to release something into production and we got held up. And that, so they're looking for impediments or things that go wrong. And that sort of sense-making exercise where the team is looking at what they did and how they performed, and then how their product hits the market and trying to get feedback on it, is a way to look for impediments or look for aberrations and try to bring the process back to a stable working space. So this Agile concept is a way to sort of sit in between the world of chaos and the world of, well, it's complicated, but we can still make a project plan and still deal with it. We're in the complex space. We have to try, inspect, and adapt.
I kind of have a question.
Yeah.
So is it more about identifying the impediments or what went wrong, or is there space to think about, well, what went really well about this so that we can keep moving forward?
Yes, thanks, Adana. I didn't mean to imply that it's certainly not a fault finding exercise. The standard questions in a retro is what went well, what didn't go well, and what can we improve? But yeah, absolutely. I mean, a healthy Agile team will celebrate work, acknowledge what is working really well so we can amplify, right? It's all about amplify and dampen. And that's where the complexity theory comes in. We've got a complex system. We try something, it works, amplify that. We try something else and it doesn't work, dampen that, right? We talk about impediments in Agile, remove that impediment. Other thoughts on this?
I do have a question as a practitioner here, Jason. Thank you for the information. In terms of what you're discussing, what are the characteristics of an Agile team in general?
Yeah. Cross-functional. So we want to have there's a couple like heuristics, if you will. Less than 10 people, give or take, because the more people you add to a team, the more connection points you have, right? N times n minus 2 over 1, I think. The number of nodes is that many connection points in a system. So you want to reduce the number of connection points. So 3 to 9 people-ish. Cross-functional in the sense that they're able to sort of have end-to-end delivery of value. So rather than organize where team A passes work to team B and passes work to team C, you make 3 teams comprised of A, B, and C skill sets, and you sort of have work feeding into those 3 teams from a backlog. So it's sort of a concept of cross-functional versus working in silo or working in single function. So that's the design aspect of it. From more of a personal skill aspect, right? And you've heard me hit on it, highly collaborative, highly engaged, authentic, whole person, right? Like, and their habits come forward with promiscuous pairing. So they're always working in pairs, right? They're not working my task and I'm going to work on my piece of it. In a planning exercise at the start of every sprint, I'm going to work on task A. Who wants to help me with it? Because it reinforces continuous learning. So Patrick picks up a work item and says, "Hey, I'm I'm kind of new to this. Like, has anyone done something like this before that can help me? And Emily says, yep, absolutely. I've at last sprint, I worked on something like that. So I'll pair with you and we'll work on it together. There's a mechanism actually in sprint planning. I try to coach teams to swarm to the top. So if I take 10 items in a sprint, and we're going to try to, our team of 10 is going to try to do 10 things. Don't everybody take one, right? Don't everybody take 1 through 10. 3 people work on 1, 2 or 3 people work on 2, 2 or 3 people work on 3. So start at the top, the most high priority thing, and that group swarm to the top and try to get that thing done. And teams will actually plan and organize their work around the highest value item, because they're ruthless, like they're playing the long game, but they're ruthlessly focusing on that 2-week iteration and trying to deliver value in as short a time as possible to get feedback. Those are just a couple things off the top of my head. Yeah, Dr. Bunn.
You went formal on me.
I did. Well, there's 2 Jennifers, so I you know, you did have your hand up though.
So when you're talking about a larger team than working in smaller groups and pairings of 2s or 3s, is there still kind of an inherent leader even within those pairings, or like a point person?
Yep.
Within that? Yeah. Okay. Is that usually decided on experience or just among the group? Maybe I'm getting in the weeds a bit, but.
No, we actually, so I have an exercise to get into said weeds on roles and responsibilities. So let's pin that question. It's a good one, but I want to address it because I have a visual coming up. We are wading into this from a very high level. And I'm just sort of scratching the surface on complexity theory and systems thinking. And we'll just keep diving a layer deeper. Yeah, Yvette.
So I feel like this is a silly question, but
sure,
coming from kinesiology, a sprint for me, I don't think is the same thing as what a sprint is for you. So can you define what a sprint is?
That is awesome. Yes. So it's an iteration. I primarily coach Scrum, which is the most popular Agile framework, and we're gonna deep dive on it. But the general term is an iteration. So rather than working a 12-month project as a 12-month project, we chunk that 12-month project into iterations of 1 to 4 weeks. Teams typically pick a 2-week iteration just because they get 10 working days and a weekend and just a little more sustainable that way. Plus it gives you time to plan in the beginning and then, you know, do some refinement exercises in the middle. But it is a time box within which an Agile team delivers an increment of value. So they plan something and they show something in that 1 to 4 week iteration. And then get feedback, right? Like they get feedback from a manager, you know, ideally a customer, but it could be a stakeholder, a manager, you know, someone saying, yeah, you're on the right track. Cool. I'm going to keep moving. Keep the questions coming. This is really good. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the mindset and leadership shift that needs to happen before we get more into how to do this. Because I really want you all to sit with and understand that this is actually a mindset play, not a set of practices that I can just do tomorrow. There are simple things you can do tomorrow. We're going to talk about it, but this is actually a paradigm shift in thinking. And that's what I spend most of my time doing at my company. It's working with leaders on behavior and mindset. So I should have waited for this graphic. I kind of waded into this earlier, but we've got these three epochs in the 20th century. Methodical, which is management 1.0, the turn of the century in the industrial era. Everything can be measured, right? Taylorism, scientific, I'm trying to blank. Scientific management, like we can measure the worker, right? How much time does it take to load the iron into the, whatever. I'm destroying the example, but we have workers in a factory doing menial labor. We can measure that and time it and gain efficiencies that way. Then the sort of middle part of this last century was empowerment, like, oh, we can empower people. Well, the catch is empowerment is like sort of assumes like I have all the power and I'm giving some to you. It still sort of is this inequality in paradigm, and it's still the sort of paternalistic concept of there's the leaders and then there's the workers. And then management 3.0 is collaborate. And this is where we see more and more organizations building a network of teams, reducing their hierarchy, reducing all the layers, and relying on a network of teams focused on customer value, focused on solving customer problems. And we spend a lot of time in the management 3.0 thinking about how people show up at work and like, what is our community? It's less about the task and delivery, although that's important. Customer value is important. We spend a lot of time in an agile organization making sure people are engaged and happy, and not like in a bread and circuses way, not like in a, oh, you're empowered, right? That's the 2.0 concept, but like genuinely building and creating a culture where the team is the thing. The team is how and where I work. And my team is, kind of like a family. I don't want to like over embellish it and make it sounding like super overly gushy, but it is this idea of family and community at work that helps create the right type of environment for agile teams to thrive. Because that's where you get real commitment, right? It's not fake commitment of like, here's a deadline and I'm going to carrot and stick until you meet it. You get a team working in an iteration. They make a plan. They designed the plan. They signed up for work and they're committed to that work. They're going to hold each other accountable. It's that pure accountability. So this is kind of the trajectory we're on, I guess in the corporate world, but I think as a society, we're sort of moving through to this management 3.0 concept. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to move on. So this book, Extreme Project Management by Doug DeCarlo, does this really good job of explaining the management paradigm shift. So you kind of get like sort of the treatment of workers and the treatment of like how the organization is set up from a manager to employee relationship. But now just think about like the mindset of leaders. This is a 2004 book called Extreme Project Management. So we have this Newtonian world of science and physics and like determinism, reductionism. There's a paradigm that says we can be dissected into a predictable set of cause and effect relationships, right? Like the organization is the machine. We can figure it out, dissect it, and set up policies and measure everything. It's analytical, it's left brain, linear, logical thinking. And it gave rise to waterfall project management. So in the Agile space, we sort of set up Agile as the antithesis of waterfall and do a little bit of like shaming of waterfall as like traditional. Waterfall is like that image I just described of earlier of like requirements, design, requirements, analysis, development, testing, release to production. So waterfall is sort of this, old world traditional concept, and Agile is everything else. But it's this idea, it's this predict and plan concept. We can see and control, and with enough planning, we will, we'll nail the target. We can minimize change if we lock in requirements, right? If we lock everything down and do all the thinking up front, then the workers can do all the working, right? And it fits so well with this industrial era Taylorism of workers are dumb and leaders are smart, right? Managers are smart, and we just tell people what to do and they do it. Management 3.0, that doesn't work. It's collaborative, it's egalitarian. People are working together. And then adding rigor to the process can help us feel good, right? The more we control, the more policies we add, the more procedures we put in place, the more control we feel, rather than trusting and allowing teams to solve problems. So the quantum mindset is change oriented. It's what's needed on this new world and the future world of complex projects. He called them extreme projects in 2004. Based on the reality that change is the norm. And remember, it's in contrast to the Newtonian mindset that says stability is the norm. So uncertainty reigns, right? Back to that VUCA concept. Murphy's Law rules. So we can expect surprises, right? When things get bad, they could always get worse. We should welcome change because we know it's going to happen, and embracing change. So part of that agile adaptive mindset is we embrace change. And we're going to, we actually relax our controls and trust and empower. And that is where we get security. So that's a huge shift, right? From control and manage to build and empower.
So can you tell us what that kind of looks like in an example?
Yeah, so if I was a Newtonian mindset leader, I would micromanage. I would meet with my team every day, ask them what they're up to, and critique their work, give them pointers, follow up with them, maybe have this task board of like, hey, what everybody's working on, and just spend my time following up with people. And then, put rules in place to reinforce that. In an agile way of working, there is a team of 10 people that's completely self-managed. The manager is not part of the team, and they meet every day to update each other. They've got a visible backlog of work. They've got a chunk of that they planned for their 2-week iteration that they're going to deliver at the end and show stakeholders. And every day they meet for a stand-up to say, hey, I worked on this. I'm almost done. This afternoon, I should be able to take up the next task. And the managers can attend. They can come to the stand-up, but they're not participating. They're just observing. And there's a lot less management, right? So this whole right column is like, you probably don't need as many managers. The organization I work at, just as an example, Mona, we've changed our management structure to the span of control for managers is 20 to 30. So nobody is a manager until you take on 20 to 30 people. We don't have like junior managers.
The only thing about that is if you say that chaos is the norm, there does have to be some sort of structure that, even though management might be hands off, they do have to provide some sort of boundaries of. So I'm used to, before coming to SAM, having this sort of mindset. But however, you can do whatever you want within, there's clear boundaries of your ability to lead and do, whether it's resources or money. But I'm a little concerned that chaos is norm about quantum. I mean, I don't know if it's more of a fact, because actually over time, employees don't do well under chaos.
Yeah.
They burn out, they leave. So that's kind of, I think we do have to have some stability. I mean, we're seeing that in healthcare now. You don't want constant chaos. I mean, I hope that chaos is not norm. I'll have to be honest. In what I've lived the last 2 years in the healthcare field, we're going to be in a bad situation if this is norm.
What's
so? No, Jason. I appreciate. I think we're striving for structure. I have to be honest. Believe me, you don't want to go to a hospital that's nothing but chaos.
Absolutely.
You need structure. Trust me. You want that medicine to show up at a certain time.
Yep.
So anyway,
what's great about this is so I love that you bring this up, Mona. I am not proposing a binary, right? I'm saying there's sort of a spectrum, and that maybe the extreme project management works in some cases and in some industries and in some spaces where we can go all the way to this right. But in a lot of places, we're somewhere in the middle. There's a little bit of this, this waterfall or this Newtonian paradigm, but we want to be more like this because we recognize that sometimes there's chaos, sometimes there's complexity that we need to navigate. So I just wanted to kind of show the two ends, and maybe in this dialogue we find where we meet in the middle.
Well, I just want to say also, it's interesting to hear your perspective from a financial viewpoint with your background of seeing, because I really do live in somewhat of a small box in healthcare. So I'm less aware of what's going on, but I do agree that I see a lot of chaos just in general in the world. So I'm looking for ways to provide honestly structure to my students and less chaos. And if you can show me how to use Agile to help bring about a better outcome for my students, I'm very much interested, or even my research.
Cool.
All right. Yes.
Oh, that's good. Good call outs. Appreciate it. So here's just a couple examples. I want to move past this. We spent a little bit of time on this, right? Shifting from deliver to discover. Right? So it's this sort of empiricism discovery process, getting feedback from stakeholders. The results kind of tell you which way to go rather than the plan, sticking to the original plan. Fire and then redirect the bullet, if you want a metaphor, sort of like a homing missile rather than a cannonball. And when I start to lose control, instead of trying to tighten the grip with policies, I agree on guidelines. And there's another Agile practice in teams called working agreements. So we set up working agreements, and every retrospective, we adjust and refine our working agreements so that we're working better together as a system. I think this is the last little bit here, and then we'll move on. So predict and plan, right? This sort of Newtonian predict and plan. It works well for a machine, and it works well for organizations that want the assurance and stability of something that they can design and control. We assume there's a linear relationship between cause and effect. Problems are solvable. Unknowns can be known, and with enough analysis, we can know what to expect. So we plan up front, make decisions from the top down, create structures, rely mainly on analysis, and we create siloed areas of expertise. If you want to move into an agile way of working and take a sense and respond approach, which works well in complexity, and where we have systems that are more living and whose dynamics and emergencies and behaviors are difficult, if not impossible to predict. So like a VUCA world, for example, we can't always make sense of what's going on. Cause and effect can only be perceived in retrospect. Patterns won't repeat. Surprises will happen. And one small change can make a big impact. So we plan as we go. We decide quickly with just enough information, emphasize rapid feedback. Agile teams and agile ways of working is all about feedback. Feedback at the daily stand-up, feedback at the retrospective at the end, constantly trying to improve our people, how we work together, our process, like the structure of our work, and then our product, whatever it is we're doing. So let's talk about 4 key pillars to agility. And then we'll take a break. So Dr. Santiago, I think, Jose, you asked me earlier about like, what does an agile team look like? So that was the first one. Empowered, accountable, and cross-functional. So I think one thing I missed in my off-the-cuff example is that accountability. So this might be a stretch, but Mona, you asked about like management sort of being away. What they're accountable to is not to the manager, but to the work. And so by building clear, visible backlogs and prioritizing that backlog based on business value, and there's a role that does that, it's the product owner. That product owner role decides what the team will do and clarifies the why. But how they do it is a matter of self-organization. And the team, every iteration, pulls the top chunk of the backlog into their sprint and says, you know, we think based on past performance and based on just some upfront rough estimation, we think we can deliver these 10 things, right? We think we can do this much work in 2 weeks. So, and they agree to it. Like it's a commitment at the start of the sprint. They make a plan and say, hey, product owner, this is what we think we can do. Go ahead and adjust your roadmap and whatever otherwise, right? So there's this give and take between the self-organized accountable team and the role that's responsible for prioritizing the work and articulating why it's valuable to the organization or to customers. And the essence of this is a collaborative team. So we have a cross-functional, accountable, and empowered team, and it's and they collaborate. This is a real agile team, real collaboration. Not in it from themselves, not individual. It's the whole, or the whole organization is centered around this idea of an agile team. The second big pillar is iterative and incremental delivery. So you heard me talk a little bit about iterations or sprints. It's also incremental. So we deliver some small bit and get feedback. There's this like silly graphic, I don't have it up, but customer wants a vehicle. Okay, give them a skateboard. That's not quite right. Okay, I'll add a stick to it and give you a scooter. Well, that's not quite right. I'll put a motor on it and give you a moped. Well, that's not quite right. And then eventually a car. But don't build them a car first, because when they said vehicle, you didn't really know. They didn't really specify, right? So if a customer is trying to solve a problem, give them an incremental bit of value and see if it's the right thing, rather than try to build everything up front all at once. So we do iterative and incremental delivery and continually deliver value, continually show work. that allows us to pivot, right? So if we have to totally like change direction at the 6-month mark and throw away all that work, like that's fine. The pivoting is not as drastic because we've been getting updates all along. It's not a black box for 6 months. The third pillar is continuous learning. Learning fast and making it safe to fail. So by breaking work into these small chunks, we can innovate and learn every 2 weeks and even every day with the daily stand-up. And that reflection allows for innovation and learning to bake into the process. And then finally, minimizing waste. This is like the continuous improvement, that lean Deming concept baked in. Continuously improve, taking that reflection and making it better next time. Questions or reactions on this? I want to get a little bit of dialogue before we take a break.
And I think that this makes sense and is a good way to move, but I think it's also like completely opposite of academia and policies and rules and, you know, be innovative in your curriculum, but it's going to take you a year and a half to do that. And then your innovative idea is now a year and a half old, and, you know, so it's, I mean, it's like some conflict. It's like, okay, that sounds great, but
yeah,
your hands are tied slightly.
Yeah. Hands are tied how?
Just the like procedural step-by-step policies and procedures that are in place for one, when you go to like change something, at least, you know, what say fairly big in terms of academia, or like put a new degree to prepare students for jobs in the future that may not exist or are starting to exist or something. You know, the jobs are there, but to go through the policy, procedure, changes, everything that's in place, it takes a while. It's not a quick change.
Yeah.
Adding classes, you know, having a new class to teach or things like that. So just those are just some of my thoughts of hearing this. I mean, the committee meetings and, you know, some of the stuff we do, definitely you can employ this, but for the bigger stuff, I'm just not quite seeing it yet.
Well, and are those policies and procedures from a place of the Newtonian mindset? Like, are we trying to control? Are we trying to add rigor rather than empower and trust?
Yes, I would think that they're from that.
Yeah.
Old
Other thoughts?
Just to add on to like what Jennifer was saying, it's just, I think academia is such an antiquated system, and it's a lot of just you know, not wanting to have this flexibility, especially at, you know, the higher levels as you go up, which then will reflect onto the lower levels. So, yeah.
If I can maybe add on just briefly, like earlier, Jason, when you talked about bureaucratic layers that occurred in like software engineering earlier, like those words hit home. And I thought, oh, all of academia is just layer after layer after layer of bureaucracy. So to me, I don't know if that's what you were getting at, Yvette, but that was my kind of interpretation of what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it's not wanting to, or not so much not wanting to, but like things have been done that way. And then no one's like, hey, let's try this new thing. Like no one, I don't know why, but yeah, no one's saying that or wanting to be that person, I guess.
Jason, you said something very interesting to me that made me thought maybe put me to think at the very beginning of the presentation when you said that businesses, right? They are all about net worth, right? Is that, you say something like that earlier, right? About net worth.
Business value, I think.
Correct.
Yeah, yep.
And obviously your information here is extremely valuable. I don't disregard that, but when these models comes into education, at least in my view, from my experiences, education, obviously the university sometimes, or not sometimes, they run like businesses, but education itself, our product is not money. Our product is learning.
Yeah.
And that is quite difficult sometimes to measure in terms of net worth. Mm-hmm. And it takes it takes longer, at least from my view. So, I'm trying to fit in what you're talking about here into, okay, how can I be more agile, right? How could we make these characteristics of agility work in my situation? So that's what I'm struggling with, that education versus the business part of it. Thank you. That's just my comment.
And what I wonder, Jennifer and I talked a little bit, just sort of getting ready for this and trying to understand the context and the group and some of the challenges. I wonder if for the research work and also, well, I think anything you all do, making work visible. So I don't have that as one of these 4 pillars. By the way, Mona, you're exactly right. It is Plan, Do, Check, Act repainted by Alistair Coburn. It's the same concept. It's, cyclic. Agile software development is an evolution of lean from the 50s.
Okay, great, Jason. So that's what I wanted to know. So I understand lean and I understand PDCA and that whole.
Yep.
But tell me a little bit, you talk about Agile being a spinoff. It just helps me connect the dots because I'm very familiar with those two. Yeah. So Agile, is it like a softer, more millennial version of these old concepps? Just help me.
Yeah. That's not a bad way. I think when you take, and Jose, I want to come back to your thing here. I will, I promise.
No worries.
It's about visible work, but when the lean concept, the Toyota way, it was all about workers pulling the end cord and like Plan, Do, Check, Act, and like it really worked in Japan. When we brought it to the sort of Western American version, it became all about cost reduction. Like lean means reduce waste, and we dehumanize because we're just trying to measure everything. Agile is like same core concept, but not the sort of bastardized, overly cynical version of it. It's a very human approach, as you said. So teams, happy workers, and focusing on delivering value rather than just continuous improvement is in there, like the waste reduction is in there, but that's not the whole point of it, right? It's just one of 4 big concepts.
So I do want to say something to the group because in my history with hospitals, lean can be actually used as a tool to reduce your budget. They skinny out anything that looks like anything fluffy. So it can become pretty hardcore if not used in a balanced way. And this does sound, I don't know a lot about Agile, but it does seem like a softer version with less reduction of resources and streamlining financially, because lean is definitely, at least the hospitals use it in a cut the budget kind of way.
Where I was going with the visible work piece. So I think in any context, one thing I'd invite you all to try coming out of this workshop is make your work visible. So for learners, for students, that could be make it visible and work in shorter increments. There's been some experiments in primary education. I don't know how this would work in higher ed, but in primary education with subjects color coded on a wall in a backlog with certain tasks, and students like on their own moving work items from backlog in progress to done, just a simple Scrum flow, and doing that in a 2-week iteration, and then showing their work at the end and getting feedback, right? And you know, pairing and swarming with other people in the class. So that's one thought. Same thing with project work, right? Can you put your work in a backlog, make it visible, and have people touch something like a simple Trello board. You could even do it. I mean, you can even do it in Excel if you wanted to. Like, there's very simple tools to make this work. Make your work visible, have ownership and accountability. I'm working on this, and you're trying to get a batch of work done at the end of a 2-week iteration.
So I wanted to mention 2 things. You know, as we were talking, I could see how I could utilize some of this in my own classroom, right? Because I have more control over that. But particularly with classes that you do have teams. I actually have one class in particular, which they do a lot of teamwork, work on a big project. And it's funny because when you talk about this idea of the sprints, right, that they're doing small tasks, getting feedback to continue to build on and learn from, a comment that I'd gotten from a student about, you know, how to improve the class is, why don't we just have less assignments and one larger project in the end? And I'm thinking, because that's a bad idea. You can't get feedback and learn from.
There you go.
that sort of method. And so even though it seems like a lot of work, which it is, you know, you get more practice, you get more feedback, you know how to improve.
Exactly. Yep.
The second thing I wanted to mention is that the faculty staff book club is reading this book called Black Box Thinking by Matthew Seid. And this is reminding me of that in terms of, like, we need to be thinking about what we're doing and not afraid to point out our mistakes and improve, right? And it actually compares a lot of various industries, the healthcare industry, the aviation industry, criminal justice, but how some of these industries either do a really good job of learning from their mistakes and making changes, or they don't. And healthcare tends to be one that does not apparently learn from their mistakes. So we're actually doing something here at the university to kind of, that's in line with agile thinking.
That's sort of like locus of control, internal locus of control of an organization, or like, I don't know, efficacy, like desire to change the environment rather than just let the status quo continue to be, I think is another big shift, right? And like, you know, you all have mentioned, we got in chat about the legislature and regulations, and like, I get all that. Like, I'm not dismissing any of the broader like challenges you all face, but at a local level, like, what can you control, what can you change, and what can you do to bring in more feedback, to bring in more visible work, to bring in more team into the way you work. So good. So let's take a break. Can we go till 10:40 Eastern? It's 12 minutes. When we come back, we'll do a couple things, but just some examples, but that's kind of the end of the lecture piece. So 10:40, see you all soon. Thanks. How we doing?
Super.
Good.
I just checked in on Bryn. She's practicing doing handstands.
Nice. I resisted the urge to say hi.
Yeah. You saw her peek in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I don't know if you'll get to this specifically, but I do have a question. Of like how do you utilize some of these concepts with a group that maybe you don't lead? Like,
say more.
So now that we have folks who are empowered with some of these ideas and skills, and they are either, let's say, a committee member or their department chair isn't here, and they think they see ways where it could be utilized, but they're not in charge. How do you kind of maneuver that in?
It's a good question, and I have an answer.
You don't?
No. I'll answer for the group, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
But I mean, the punchline is, I think the easiest foot in the door is, can we make a backlog of work, and can we sort of make a backlog in progress done? Just make work visible. Like,
yeah,
visible work is the easiest way. I think it just creates like a platform for conversation that we often don't have, because work is hidden and work is, it exists in other forms. So for committees or for whatever it is, like, make work visible, assign owners to it. Do you have that Trello board handy? I took a picture of my work calendar. I've got that.
Yeah, I've got it, and I can pull it up and share my screen whenever you're ready.
Is it I'll stop.
Like, because I showed you the one I have with my research team, right?
No, you described it.
Oh, okay.
I'm just curious. Does it have like assignees and stuff on it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, let's talk.
And it's the most basic template in Trello of
that's perfect.
to do, doing done kind of thing.
No, we'll hit on it. I'm going to do this this Scrum workflow just to kind of explain Scrum, and then we can go to like what we'll hit on the visible work topic and like what it looks like, and then probably wrap.
Okay.
My slides did not update. I just fixed something. Hold on. Share. Yeah, I'm just going to explain like all the bits and pieces of an Agile framework, and I think that'll drive some questions.
Okay. What is your family doing right now?
Did you hear the screaming in the background?
No.
Oh, good. Okay. I just turned the noise machine on. Like, Tobin was having a fit, and I just went downstairs and I was like, honey, can you try to keep, I know you're trying, but like, lots of screaming. She's like, I know, everybody was hungry, so we're having an early lunch. Like, okay. I told her I had a workshop, and I sit, this is the bonus room over our garage, and our garage door is like obscenely loud.
Yeah.
Like,
ours was too.
Yeah. So I'm just like, every time she opens the garage door, like, I feel it in my chair. Like, everyone can hear that. All good.
The joys of working from home.
Joys of working from home. You know what though? I wouldn't change it. We're doing this reentry thing at work, and everyone I talk to in North Carolina is like, I'm not going back in to sit on Zoom all day in a building. Like, I can do that in my pajamas. Like, it's just not, because everybody's in Boston and Texas, and it's just, there's no team in North Carolina.
Yeah. Well, and the Texas Fidelity, I'm about 1.5 miles from that facility right now.
Are you really? Nice.
A I thought of you as I was driving in yesterday.
So where are you? What time right now? Grapevine?
I'm actually in Keller.
Keller.
So I have run many, many miles around that Fidelity facility. One of my sisters actually used to work in that facility.
Oh, cool.
And Fidelity paid for her MBA. And then she promptly left them to do only nonprofit work.
Awesome.
So we used to meet to run there quite a bit.
Yeah, I've only been to the Westlake office twice, but the Marriott, Gaylord something.
Yeah, in Grapevine.
That thing is like a Taj Mahal. It's so nice.
There's also one in Nashville.
Is there?
Go to Nashville. Yes.
Yeah, it falls within our corporate rate, so I stay there every time.
If you're ever here during, I guess the winter, like Christmas time, they do a really cool ice exhibit.
Oh, cool.
And it's fun to take kids to and stuff.
Cool.
Yay, people are coming back.
Coming back. We didn't bore everybody.
Jen, you're making me homesick. I used to live in Keller and we would go to the ice exhibit every Christmas. And I'm like, oh, we got to go. Next time we visit, we got to go do that.
Yes.
It's always so much fun.
I was thinking the same thing. Gaylord, Texan. I've been there many, many times.
Gaylord, Texan.
Yes.
That was close.
I don't love going to the Gaylord. It's overwhelming for me personally, but it doesn't take a lot to overwhelm me as it goes. And we have some new people coming in.
Is the Gaylord Texan right across the street from the Great Wolf Lodge?
Yes.
Yes.
That's why it sounds. We went to the Great Wolf Lodge a few weeks ago with my family. Took the kids there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're going to dive back in with an activity, and then there's like a couple more things I want to share, and just kind of drive a little bit more discussion and then close out. So, Scrum workflow. We're going to talk about Scrum, which is the most popular Agile framework. If you ask me why it's popular, I would say, well, it clarifies roles, responsibilities, artifacts, and events. And it's something people can grab onto. There are like other Agile frameworks. We're not going to get into it, but Scrum is a nice conversational piece because you can talk about the product owner role that I mentioned earlier. We can talk about Scrum Master, and we can talk about all the other events that I mentioned, retrospective, iteration planning, etc. So they're all here. I'm going to kind of go through this diagram, and what I'd like you all to do is use annotate. You don't all have to do it. I just need one person who's like decent with it. But it's like a fill in the blank thing. So the list is on the right. I'm just going to kind of talk, and if someone wants to fill in as we go. There's a legend. So the events, there's 5 events in the gray boxes at the top. There are 3 roles. And so roles plus participants, there's a couple options there, but there's 3 core roles in Scrum. And then there's 5 artifacts. So I'm going to kind of explain this diagram and how Scrum works. And you can kind of follow along. And if someone is hip and quick on annotate, you can fill that out for us.
Any quick volunteers to be the hip, quick annotator? Thank you, Adana. I was going to volunteer you if no one did.
We could just see what happens. I was totally cool with like the chaos of 5 people doing it. So let's say someone has an idea, and I might annotate a little bit as we go. So someone has an idea. I want to do something. I want to ally resources and time and energy and put forth the effort of doing something. That person needs a team, right? Needs a Scrum team. So right here, can y'all see my mouse? Yeah, so Scrum team right here. They need a Scrum team. So they gather 3 to 9 people, an Agile team, and say, hey, I need you all to work on this. Here's this project. Now that project is going to be articulated in what's called, whoever's annotating can write Scrum team right here in this double line space. I think it's on the list. Yeah, Scrum, it shows up 3 times apparently. So they define all this work, right? They say, all right, hey, here's some things we want to do. We've got item X, we've got item Y, we've got item Z to kind of help us achieve our outcome. Here's some items that we need to do. They put it in what is known as a product backlog. So this line right here is product backlog. Shorthand, it's just called backlog. So product backlog, because it comes from product development space, but you just call it backlog. It is literally a list of activities ordered by value. We stress business value at my company and in most corporate spaces because that's what we care about, but just value, right? Value to customer, value to whatever. Whoever your key stakeholder is, what do they define as value? Now there's a role in charge of this backlog. Their key responsibility is making sure that it is refined and ordered by value, and that's the product owner. That product owner role is one person, not a committee. And in actuality, this is product owner and development team right here. The whole team is product owner, Scrum Master, and development team. I'm gonna get to Scrum Master in a second, but that is the whole team. So there's basically 3 roles: development team or Scrum team, product owner, and Scrum Master. So that product owner defines the why, like why we have this problem. They meet with the stakeholder, whoever, I just keep stamping. They meet with the stakeholder or set of stakeholders and understand the why. What's the intent here? What's the charter for this project? Define it, articulate it, and share it with the team. That all turns into what? A list of expectations, outcomes, objectives to achieve in this backlog. But then the team takes it from here. This is where it kind of stops, being the product owner's responsibility. So now the whole Scrum team meets all together. Scrum Master's not here. We'll get there in a second. The whole Scrum team meets together as a unit and says, okay, we're gonna work for 2 weeks, 1 to 4 weeks. They pick 2. How much work can we do? And they roughly say about this much work. So they take these top 3 items off the product backlog and put it into the sprint backlog. I think it says sprint backlog and sprint goal. Yeah, sprint backlog and sprint goal is this line right here. They say, all right, for 2 weeks, we can do these 3 items, and these 3 items, we're gonna break them down into tasks. So this team of 3 to 9, all right, these 4 tasks, these 3, these 2, they do all this breakdown of tasks and they do all this planning. And they say, yep, that amount of work, Bill's on PTO on Thursday, Friday, Jack's, just had a baby, so he's not gonna be back this week. This is our capacity. This is how much work we can do. And they're making a commitment. So an accountable team, they're making a commitment to do that much work. they make a plan to deliver that sprint backlog within the sprint. And that sprint backlog is defined by a sprint goal. What do we want to achieve this sprint? Like what sort of ties together these top 3 items? There's some sort of goal. Back to that sort of superior framework of intent I mentioned about the military. Like if you have the overarching intent, you can sort of mix and match and change the individual items as long as you meet that intent. So they're constantly asking each other, are we on track for our sprint goal? And this activity in the gray box here is called sprint planning. So they do sprint planning, a couple hours at the start of a 2-week iteration, and they say, here's our sprint goal. Here's how these top 3 items decompose into tasks, and they put it all on a board. They put it all on like a task board, and we'll show an example of what that looks like. Now a sprint right here, this top gray box, is up to a month, so 1 to 4 weeks. 2 weeks is quite popular. I think it's a pretty reasonable cadence for people, and it's pretty sustainable. They do a 1-month sprint, and then every day they do what's called a daily scrum. They meet as a scrum team. And by the way, does anyone know what scrum is from? Does anyone recognize that word?
Rugby.
Yes. But what is it in rugby? You're muted, but your hand symbols are perfect.
When teams try to get together and then the ball's put in the middle.
That's exactly right. And so both sides, but that one team on one side is pushing, trying to get the ball and trying to move it up the field. And that concept of like everyone working together to move the ball up the field, that's why it's called scrum. So the daily scrum is actually to put the ball back in play. Hey, we took a break because we went home and with our families or whatever, or we just, it's been a day. Every day we want to kind of put the ball back in play, a little daily planning session to say what happened yesterday, what's on deck for today, are we on track for our sprint goal? So this gray box right here is the daily scrum. That is done by the development team. The scrum master's there and the product owner's there, but it's for the team. The scrum master typically facilitates, but again, it's the team talking to each other. It's not a status meeting. It's not a report. It's 3 to 9 people talking about what they worked on and what they're going to work on next. A chance to pair, a chance to swarm, a chance to reinforce some learning, a chance to jot down. I got stuck on this yesterday. Maybe in the retro at the end of the sprint, we should talk about that. Jot down some impediments that they're hitting. At the end of the sprint, so they meet every day for 10 days. At the end of the sprint, they release what's called a potentially releasable product increment. Now, scratch off the first 3 words and just call it increment. It's just a chunk of work that has value. Something they can get feedback on, something they can show to stakeholders and ask, are we on the right track? Now in like the software space, we can show working code, right? And so that's cool. But in your context, it might just be getting feedback on something, right? A report, a bit of analysis. It literally could be anything. It doesn't matter. But by breaking that work into a 2-week increment and planning and executing against it, you really focus the team on what value they're delivering, and you create this mechanism for stakeholder engagement. Because every 2 weeks, you've got an increment to show to people. So this one says Scrum team, stakeholders, and customers. So it's everybody. This event is called Sprint Review. And the group, it says Scrum team, stakeholders, and customers. So everybody, open invitation, come see what we've been working on. After that event, the team then goes in private, just the Scrum team, and has a retrospective. So this event is retrospective and it's for the Scrum team. It's a private event for them to talk about Does anyone remember the 3 things I said they focus on? Continuous improvement, 3 Ps. People, process, product. So people, how are we doing as a team? Process, the way we're working, the meetings, the pairing, etc. And then product, like whatever we're working on. We just got a bunch of feedback on our product from stakeholders. What do we want to do about it? How are we going to adjust? That work feeds, and this is called the retrospective. All that work feeds back into the product backlog, and the cycle continues. You might learn something from either the sprint review or the sprint retrospective that would create a new backlog item. And the product owner might decide that's more valuable than items 4, 5, and 6. So I'm going to put it at the top, and it's going to go into the next sprint. Typically, if there's a continuous improvement item, that happens naturally. We need to fix this next sprint. It goes to the top. We move it into our sprint backlog. Notice the 3 magnifying glasses. 4. So there's these 4 inspect and adapt opportunities. We inspect and adapt and the sprint planning. We've got this ordered backlog from the product owner. We're going to take the work and make sure we know how to do it. So that's a good chance to kind of make sure we have the right skills and capacity, make sure we're on the right track. We've got the daily scrum, the daily planning event to inspect and adapt our process and people. We hit all 3 Ps at this, or we hit the product piece at the sprint review with our stakeholders. And then we can hit all 3 Ps down here in the sprint retrospective. So there's these 4 inspect and adapt opportunities built into this 2-week cycle. Did we miss?
Just a quick thing.
Yeah.
Is this development team here, right? Or is this supposed to be the Scrum team under the daily Scrum?
Yeah, you got it. Development team. That's right. The only thing I didn't hit on was the Scrum Master. And notice that this person is sort of outside of the whole thing. A truly self-organized team might not need one. But new Agile teams that are trying to get their process going, the Scrum Master is the master of Scrum, not the master of the team or anybody else. They are an expert on the process, and they're helping the team. They're facilitating the work of the team, facilitating all the meetings, helping them, identify impediments, maybe remove impediments as needed. It's a leadership role, but it's leadership and service to the team. And I like to coach in organizations I work with that the Scrum Master and the product owner are the leaders of the team. They're the key leadership roles, but they're also on the team. So it's this concept of shared leadership. There is no single boss. There's a clear division of labor from the why and the what of the product owner and the how we're going to do it with the team. And the Scrum Master helps sort of facilitate that whole process. What questions can I answer on that? Because I know there was an earlier question, Jennifer, I think you asked it just about roles and how does this all work. Someone brought in management as well.
So when I was taking notes as you were talking through it, Jason, I wrote that the development team and the Scrum team were kind of one and the same and similar, but they seem to be different here.
Scrum team is the whole team.
Okay.
Development team is like developers.
Okay.
So don't get caught, like your context, that doesn't work. It doesn't make sense because we're not like software developers. So I guess
it's the folks who are like, it's not the leader part, right? It doesn't include the leaders, but it's the people doing the task-oriented activity.
Yeah, and the Scrum Guide is written to say developers because it could be anything. It's not software engineers. You could be developing any product, any solution, literally anything. So your team of 10 researchers, you could call them developers, or you could call them research. You could call it the research team.
Thank you.
Roseanne?
I have two questions. The first diagram, that's also a sprint planning or sprint review or sprint. It's not labeled. It's got the 3 people.
This thing.
Well, yeah, it's right there. Which one?
Okay.
Which one is that?
Thank you. So Scrum team again. Can I copy that? No.
Okay, so it's the Scrum team. That's what I thought. Okay.
And then the activity is, and it's white because it's not a core event, but it happens continuously, is refinement activities. So throughout the 2 weeks, the team will meet every so often and refine the backlog. So that's actually, there's no magnifying glass, but that's another really adapt. Like, hey, because what we don't want, I know you have another question buried in there. What we don't want is we get to the end of the sprint, cool, we got great feedback, now what? They're actually like trying to keep a couple sprints worth of backlog refined and ready to go. We understand just enough to get a couple weeks worth of work out. So teams are continually doing that refinement and planning.
Okay. So my other question is the eras and then the everyday. So can you chat about that a little bit more? I understand the big eras, I think, but then you have the everyday. So should there really is an everyday era in there implied, right?
Yeah. So remember the big is the sprint, the 4 weeks. The everyday is the teams that the Scrum team effectively. It's a 2-week sprint, but every day we're having this like feedback loop. So I guess the arrow is feedback loop. Feedback loop because we're having a stand-up meeting, 15 minutes. We call it a stand-up, but you could sit. 15-minute daily Scrum to sort of understand what was accomplished yesterday and what's still left to be accomplished to meet the sprint goal.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you all see in your world how something like a Scrum Master or something like a product owner role, not a formal, because we do this all the time at my company too. It's sort of, we call it dual hat, but like you sort of wear the hat for part of the time, right? Like an additional responsibility. Does anyone see how that responsibility could be baked into the way you work? The team facilitator and the team.
Yes.
What? Go ahead, Lilibeth.
Yeah, just for example, in the clinical between the faculty and students, and from the preceptors or the nurses in the clinical. So every day when we have clinical, it seems like we have like this, system. So we have every day and we have to meet, for example, and we look at what we need to improve, what those assignments, and if you do more than that, we accomplish, we talk about that, and then at the end, we accomplish what their goals for that clinical day.
Yeah, that's great.
Can I add there, Jason? We have every weekly goals that we give to the students. So we want to know if they meet on that day during the clinical hours. Mm-hmm. And if they didn't do it, and then the following clinical, we need to follow up that so that they will meet all the goals that they require to complete during the clinical rotation.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I see a clear application to some of these concepts with clinical work. Others, what do others see?
My thought on research projects, like if you're collaborating, you have your research team. I don't think daily Scrum. I mean, it would be like expanded out. You know, I mean, just because of how our world works in academia, and you wear different hats anyway. The teaching, research, the service. There's all this. So as much as I would love to shut the door and be like, sorry, doing my research, peace out, back away, you know, I'll call you in 3 days. Like you can't. And so we're constantly kind of switching between one role to the next. But I can see how, if you had your team where let's just, quick regroup. Where are we at? Who's done what? Who's doing? And then now, break, everybody go, do what you got to do and then come back.
And if you've got a dedicated team in a kind of complex environment, a 1 to 2 week sprint meeting every day makes sense. Like you have to. But if you're not dedicated, which by the way, dedicated is ideal, right? But like I get it. If you're not dedicated and you're working on a lot of things, and maybe your time horizon's a bit longer, it's maybe not so urgent or complex. Maybe 1 month sprint makes more sense, and maybe a Tuesday, Thursday, or a Monday, Friday, or once a week, right? Like the point is have feedback loops and replan. I would never beat anybody up about make sure it's every day because you could do it every day and it's crap. If it's useful, replan and inspect and adapt as often as you can. Praful?
Yes. So I think this concept can be very valuable when we are looking into proposal development, where you have a deadline. So let's say there is a week, 2 week, 3 week deadline, and you want to bring in people like, whatever, maybe the, team, the members, but you want to get things accomplished on a daily basis or even sometimes multiple times in a day. So you have to make sure that everybody is on the same path and also getting the feedback. Because just like as you said, with, what's the expectation, what's the product and what we want, you need refinement, and everybody has multiple ideas, but, we need to work on that. And there's a specific deadline to meet those expectations. So I think that's and I like that chart where you have this, where it can, I don't know, if you can share it, if you don't mind, I can copy paste it for a proposal.
Yeah. No, I'll send
really
this
helpful.
Yeah, I'll send this all out for sure. Yeah, that's just it, right? Like that. And there's no rule on how much refinement you should or should not do. It's like as often as needed. If you are working on research and something that's highly collaborative and needs a lot of bouncing ideas off of and brainstorming, like whatever the task is, if it's highly collaborative, do a lot of refinement, like work together. We champion co-located teams, global and pandemic, right? It's getting harder and harder, but if you can sit together and spend time together, that's absolutely useful. I want to show one more thing, and by all means jump in if you have more thoughts. I'll stop share. Jennifer, do you want to? So on the backlog piece, right? Backlog moves to sprint backlog. The team, an Agile team, working on that sprint backlog and that sprint goal, visible work is the key. So I wanted to hit on roles. I wanted to hit on roles and events and stuff just to kind of give you all like a taste. But the one thing I really want to harp on is the visible work piece. You can influence other people. What was your question during the break? Influencing other people.
So during the break, I asked the question, how do we start to use, now that we're armed and dangerous with some of these concepts and skills, how do we use them in teams where we are not the leader? So we're not driving that bus.
Yeah. And the first thing that popped in my head was make work visible. Like if you do nothing else, you're not going to be able to set up a product owner or a scrum master likely overnight unless it's like something close to home and local. But making work visible and tracking it, and the habit of, like, if we were all co-located, it would be stickies on a wall. But there are tools we could use virtually to make that work. The biggest thing that plagues organizations and the biggest amount of waste is hidden work. And if you're a student of Lean, there's a whole, you actually reduced 3 different types of work, and I'm rusty, but Mira, Muda, and Murray. One is emotional waste. So like the burden of conflict and not good collaboration. One is hidden work, and one is uselessness or something like that. I'm probably butchering it, but in the Lean sort of background, making work visible and bringing it to the forefront so everyone can see it and it's democratized and available to all is like the first key thing. So Trello, for example, is a good place to do that. And obviously in my work environment, we actually use a tool called Jira, but it's the same concept. Every single bit of work is tracked and available and planned so that people can see what they're doing and then how it ladders up to organizational objectives. So just at a very local level, taking your project and putting all that work in a backlog, figuring out who's going to do it and moving work to done is very powerful. Do you want to pull up that example?
So this is a Trello board that I utilize with my research team of student researchers who are actually in North Carolina working with the Campbell University lacrosse team. They collect data 6 days a week, and they each own their own research project inside here. And so after learning more from this workshop, even today, I'm like, oh, I have a very imperfect Trello board. We'll need to move some things and make some adjustments. But here's what I have used for 9 months now with these students. And it's kind of this idea of brainstorm of ideas that we've put together. These kind of are just sitting. And then these are ones we're just now starting to kind of contemplate further on, making some small adjustments to, and then. And
sorry to interrupt. The to-do column in my mind is refined. So brainstorm is like unrefined, just throw it in the backlog. Yeah. Anything sticks. To-do is like we've refined it. We kind of know who might want to work on it. We've got some more clarity on it, and that's totally cool.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, because that is essentially how we use it. And then these are all research projects that the students are working on. And so, and like you can see here is I've got each student assigned to them. So like here's one particular project where we have kind of the general idea of what that project is going to be about. The student and the other faculty member that's working on this project with us, they've shared some articles with one another. So there's a way to attach things inside this Trello. And then we've created a checklist of items for them to do. And this is something, I guess, where it's a little bit different than what Jason just presented in kind of the current sprint concept. Is I have this one card for each project. And so like writing an introduction section is the student's sprint.
Yep.
And then we can even assign due dates within each one of these sprints. And I'll be honest with you too. There is just like for people who are list makers, there is just as much satisfaction in clicking this box as there is crossing off a list or throwing away a Post-it.
Yeah.
And then there's ways to communicate here and have back and forth, sharing links and updating timelines and saying this is what we're doing. And so this is just one example. The other thing I like, and certainly we have our done column of projects that we've done before, things students have worked on. And then I have this other kind of column here, and I use this as almost just kind of a drive, a cloud drive, essentially, where we share articles and work that we're going to use over and over. And so this is all work that's come out of our lab with some of our students in the past. And so we're building on all of that all the time. And those students have those manuscripts readily available. I have, and actually the other faculty I work with set up some things around a writing guide for abstract guidelines and things like that. So that's just my example of a Trello. And I only use the free version of Trello. I will say that too. And I enjoyed this so much with the students, and I'm currently managing 5 students with these projects, and it has helped me so much more keep each project organized, because sometimes I would forget who's doing what. But then I also started my own just personal Trello board for tracking my own publications, and Trello has a template for that too. So I can keep this up. If anybody wants to see anything, I can click around.
The beauty of this is everyone can see it. Everyone can access it all the time, whether you're on the project or not, right? You could open this up to anybody, any role, stakeholder, whatever. And as Jennifer was saying, you can kind of keep people updated as you make progress, and you don't have to have all of these meetings just to get a sense of status. It's all in one place.
Yeah, I have a delinquent student here, and if I were to click in it, it would you'll see a check-in like, hey, is everything okay? What's going on here?
I'm curious if so some of the tools that we already have, like Microsoft Teams, is this something you could do similarly or sort of set it up kind of like?
Teams has a function called Planner, and it works just like Trello. Okay.
And there, you can also set up tasks in Teams too, and like a checklist.
Yep. In the spirit of that, Adana, let me, Jen, I'm gonna show my calendar. Jennifer and I were talking before this workshop too, just bouncing around ideas. I actually use this personal agility process with my own calendar. So I live off of Outlook, obviously, and I color code all of my meetings, like team, personal, like you see girls dance, personal, this org, that org, whatever. And then the red, and I mark it private so no one can see it. Those are tasks. Those are like to-do items. So this is the October 18th. I'm off next week, but when I get back, there's 3 things I need to do on Monday. And I'll even say, I'll put, right here is I want to talk to this team. I've got 20 people in my team. So this group of 3 is meeting. So there's a note to myself to remember to ask them when I meet them. And I'll delete this on my calendar when it's done. And some of this stuff is high urgency, so I need to get it done Monday and Tuesday. Some of the stuff I'll sort of move into the next day. But this is sort of my 1 week sprint, if you will. I need to get, plus this one, I need to get these 5 or 6 things done this week. And this is just a screen cap because it's on my other laptop. But if you look at the next few weeks, there's things for me later on. Management paperwork stuff, whatever. I just put that on my calendar and use that as a little backlog. So what do y'all think about some of these techniques either for personal work or project work, teamwork?
I started using Asana, which is similar to Trello. It just has a little bit more integration than Trello does. Yeah, it's pretty much the same as Trello. The only thing I could see there being challenges where if you're not the project leader, maybe like someone might not use that, and then not everyone is on the same page, kind of. So
yeah. Good. So just a couple examples, and as we kind of head around to home plate here on our time together, I'd like to do a bit of a closing and takeaway exercise and just see. I'm selfishly curious what you all got of it, but more for you, would like you to just take a minute to reflect and actually could be another teaching opportunity. So this is the simplest version of a retrospective that I could muster. Remember I said the 3 typical questions are: what went well, celebrate; what didn't go well, and then what can we improve? As a Scrum Master, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of ideas and different ways to mix up a retro. So made a cute little 3H version here. These are all on the internet, not my ideas, but they're out there. So same concept. What helped you? So if you could grab annotate and just jot down some ideas. What helped you? We'll run this for like 5 minutes and then we'll sort of unmic and say goodbye. What helped you? Helped your engagement, learning, and exploration of topics today? What hindered you? Anything that got in your way or didn't go so well for you? And then any hypothesis you can make. What would you make of all this, and how could you apply it to your daily work? I'm going to set just a 4-minute timer. If you don't figure out the annotate, that's totally fine. We can share a few quickly at the end. And I would always encourage an Agile team in a retro, at least put one thing in each column. Go just 2 minutes more.
My cursor got stuck there. So it was meant to be challenging to implement in university setting.
Yep, totally fine. This annotate is not amazing, but it does the job. All right, 30 more seconds. I think we'll call it here in the interest of time. So thank you all for doing that. The last thing I just want to do is just sort of do a nice close, and we've got a good group here to, I think, try this. One word, if you could. Takeaway, thought, feeling, anything you have about topic today, and then I'll say a few words and we'll say a farewell. So just one word that sort of that you're feeling right now, or how you're leaving this space today. Shout it out, and then we'll just kind of hear from as many as we can.
The progress.
I'd say new ideas.
Cool.
New approaches to working as a team and as a group to reach a goal.
Awesome. Maybe 1 to 10 words. Just a short thought is totally fine.
I typed there, rejuvenated. These kind of activities help us rethink what we normally do.
Others. Invitation to share what's on your mind.
I feel a little better equipped to manage some of the tasks that I have got on my plate.
Great. Better equipped. I love that.
Feel more open. I've been using Trello and I have felt alone in that space. Nice. And now everyone knows.
Anyone else didn't share that wants to? Great. Thank you all so much. That was just the last little piece of being open and vulnerable and sharing. It's sort of another thing we would encourage on a healthy Agile team. So I know that this probably only scratched the surface for you, and I totally recognize that we went from the 30,000 foot view context for agility VUCA world down to what does Scrum look like and how the heck can I do this? And there's a lot in between that we didn't hit on in our time together, but I so am grateful for the opportunity to come and share and hear from you. I think there is an application in higher ed and in the work that you do. I don't think I have the answer for you, honestly. I think it's going to take experimentation and learning and applying some of the principles we talked about, thinking about the 4 pillars of agility that I shared and how elements of this framework can fit in. It takes work. There's no like blueprint or perfect solution here. Your context is different. Your team is different. Do what works for you. The point is to build in practices and processes that help you be more adaptable and adjust to the changing environment. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Dr. Bunn, for having me. She just told me before this that she's coming into Raleigh this weekend. So I'm so excited to get to see her tonight. So this has been really great. Appreciate it.
Jason, Thank you. We really appreciate your time and the knowledge that you gave us today. This was a very, very different perspective from a research workshop than what we've ever done before. So I invite you all to please continue the conversations about this with one another. If you need to reach out to Jason for anything further, I'm happy to make connections. He has agreed to kind of have further discussions about things if we need his service as a Scrum Master in anything moving forward. So thank you all. I really appreciate you all attending. Have a great rest of your day and into a wonderful weekend. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Happy Indigenous Peoples Day weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jason.
Yep. Good to be with you all.